Hello everyone. To finish off the train spotting for this year, at least on my end, I thought it was a good idea to go up to the Glenbrook Vintage Railway and ride behind steam locomotive WW480. In my opinion, this is one of the best heritage railways in the country. On the way to Glenbrook, I made 2 brief stops in the Waiuku area to film DSA 551 on the Goldfields Railway. This engine will be featured in a locomotive spotlight episode soon, so stay tuned if you'd like to see that video. Firstly, we see DSA 551 crossing Cornwall Street in Waiuku. And not too far outside Waiuku station, we see 551 again, but this time we see her crossing the Waiuku River. Got away from the driver here, which didn't really surprise me, especially since the Goldfields volunteers probably all recognise me considering how many times I've been there this year. Further up north, I made a brief stop at Pukekohe station to see all the track work that was going on. There was also 6 of the ex-Perth ADL diesel multiple units in the sidings. We'll see 2 more ADLs later. At the time of uploading, the Auckland Suburban Rail Network is closed for track upgrades until January 16. The ADLs will keep running until September 2022, at which point they'll be retired as the Papakura to Pukekohe section is being electrified, meaning that before too long we'll finally start seeing the AM units in Pukekohe. And after what felt to me like a toad's age, we finally arrived at Glenbrook station to see WW480 sitting in the platform with her coaches. I was booked on the 12:30 service to Waiuku and back. .480 is one of 4 WW class 464 tank engines in preservation. She was built in 1910 at NZR's own Hillside Workshops, originally as a WG. Conversion to WW specifications took place in 1951, and the locomotive kept running on the west coast of the South Island until 1969. That year saw her run under her own power all the way from Glenbrook to Auckland, aside from the Cook Strait ferry crossing of course. The Glenbrook Vintage Railway is a heritage line that has been in operation since 1977, using the former Waiuku branch. Nowadays, these preserved locomotives run over about a 7-kilometre section of track between Glenbrook and Victoria Avenue, with plans to extend the line a little further at the Waiuku end. At Glenbrook itself, there is a track connecting the GVR with Kiwi Rail's Mission Bush branch. This station building is not an original NZR era structure. From what I gather, it was built from scratch in the 1970s. The shelter on the other side of the loop used to be at Kingsland Station in Auckland. This would have been before the Western Line was double-tracked. After getting the ticket, which cost me $25, I hopped on board WW480's consist. Because there were a lot of loud families in the coaches, I sat in the open-air coach, VB624, for pretty much the whole journey.
I only got one
This is F141, a guards van that's been modified to carry passengers, though not to the same extent as the 3 FM vans in Gisborne. Departing Glenbrook, we pass the turntable before parting ways with the Mission Bush branch. If I recall correctly, I've only ever seen an engine on this turntable once before. Besides the steam locomotives, and of course the heritage diesels, the GVR is notable for passing through a nice rural landscape for just about its entire length. Not too long after leaving Glenbrook, we pass Morley Road and the building that houses a huge American-themed model railway display. At about the halfway points on the line, we pass the sidings and workshops at Puke Oware. Notably, we can see the 2 stored ADL diesel units and DC 4536 out in the open. There was also a Bagnall DSA outside the workshop, with DBR 1295 inside. The ever-popular DBR 1254 was hidden away in a different shed, though passengers could still see her as WW 480 hauled them past the yard. This is Fernley. Up until the early 2010s, this was the terminus of the GVR. And around 23 minutes after leaving Glenbrook, we arrive at the current terminus of Victoria Avenue Station. This is in the town of Waiuku, and it's where we see 480 running round her train to run Smokebox first back to Glenbrook. The train always stops at Puke Oware on the way back, so the passengers can have a look through the workshop. This is my perspective of the journey between Victoria Avenue and Pukeoware. I used my camera to get this footage, otherwise my phone would have run out of space before we even got to Fernley. And is it just me, or does WW480's whistle sound an awful lot like that of a JA? Speaking of JAs, I wonder how 1250 is getting on. approach into Pukeoware from the Waiuku end, the railway goes down a steep 1 in 42 incline. Looking back in the shed, you can just about see DBR 1254 in there. 1254 will hopefully be out running again on Saturday, January 29 with an excursion down to Terkuiti. On that day, I'll hopefully be at the Rotokori station in Hamilton to watch the DBR. As always, I took the opportunity to wander through the workshop. There was the tiny Ruston and Hornsby diesel shunter, built in 1955, with WW644 and DC4818 undergoing overhauls, but most notable for me was DBR 1295. This was the first time I had ever seen this locomotive since she arrived at Glenbrook in 2017. In other words, the first time I'd seen her in preservation. Later in the day, I returned to Pukeoware to have a better look at 1295. And after that quick look in the DSA's cab, it was back on the WW's train for the rest of the journey to Glenbrook. The WW certainly put on a good show for this run, and I remember learning that the smoke being grey or black is usually a sign that the fireman is shoveling coal into the firebox. And at 1:43 in the afternoon, we arrived back at Glenbrook after a very nice run with WW480. After this, I went back to Pukeoware to have a better look at DBR 1295 and DC 4536. But before heading back, I was able to film the WW heading out to the turntable. Quite unexpectedly, we heard the Genesis song Home by the Sea on the shed radio when we were inspecting 1295, as it were. I've pretty much given away my music taste upon mentioning Genesis. Here's DC 4818 undergoing restoration. She was purchased by the GVR in 2018 and brought to the railway in 2019. As far as I know, she might be used on mainline excursions with DBR 1254 in the future. On a personal note, the day when I rode on the 80k farewell excursion in November 2014, it actually started with a ride, well, technically shoved by DC 4818 from Papakura to Papatoetoe, with an SD cab car on the front. As for the two DBRs, they arrived on the railway in late 2017. At that time, 1254 was still in the Max Blue livery, and and 1295 was still in the old toll rail livery with Kiwi Rail stickers. Although 1295 is now in the fruit salad colours, it's technically not in proper repaint like what 1254 has. If you look at 1295 from just the right angle, you can still see the outline of the toll rail logo in curved stripes. On the other side of the yard, we find this incredibly bizarre low-loader wagon, or at least that's what I think it is. Either way, it looks like someone left one of the larger 12-wheeled low-loaders in the dryer for too long. At the time of uploading, there are at least 2 ADL units in storage on the GVR. They are not preserved, but rather Auckland Transport doesn't have space to store them anywhere else. The units in question are ADL 803 with ADC 853 and ADL 804 with ADC 854. Even after the rest of the ADLs have been retired, we'll still have the train simulator versions to enjoy. Of course, there was also DC 4536. This locomotive is a fairly recent addition to the GVR's collection, arriving from Hutt Workshops in October 2021. She was one of at least 19 DCs used on SA and SD push-pull trains in Auckland, hence the Max Blue livery. Surprisingly, we made it back to Glenbrook Station in time to see WW480 leaving on the 2:30 service. At the time of uploading, there are 3 return trips each day that the GVR is running. On the way home, we made a massive detour to Thames in order to see this bizarre thing. This is TR24, one of only 2 surviving 060 TRs, now a playground object at Moana Taiari School, and I apologise if I've pronounced that wrong. As for the other 060 TR that's still around, she is based in Gisborne and is in full working order. I haven't the foggiest idea why this school has a locomotive in the playground, let alone such an obscure design. Either way, I still find it fascinating. Due to this area of Thames being built on reclaimed land using old mine waste, there have been concerns in recent times over possible contamination of the soil, although the most recent information I could really find on this situation was from 2011. But as far as I could tell, the area is perfectly safe today, and I think there would have been more obvious signs if it really was off limits. On the way home, I had a brief look at the old Thames railway station, but since I didn't take any pictures, I'll instead show you some scenes I took back in July 2017. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my second to last video of 2021. Please consider checking out my big highlights reel from this year. And one last message before I sign off. Take care everyone and have a good new year.